Hello, Professor Gruhn here, and we're back. We're continuing our journey into jQuery with Murach, and we're in Chapter 9 now, and we're going to talk about how to manipulate and traverse or move through the DOM. And there's a lot of detail in Chapter 9 that I really don't want you to worry about. And what I want you to understand are the principles, and then take a look at some of the pieces that you can apply those principles to. And then it will make sense. And what I ended up doing, instead of going right with the book, I created my own test page to try to teach these concepts. I had to kind of make something my own to really kind of help it make sense for me in such a way that I could explain it as best I can. And again, we're taking this at a higher level. Don't worry about all of the details. Watch this video, look at my sample code that's attached with the video, and then from there, read the chapter and then apply that. And also, the last half of the chapter, the book does an excellent job in the book applications, chapter 9. Each one of these samples, the employee list sample, the slideshow sample, slideshow 2 sample, table of contents sample is excellent, and the table of contents enhanced is even better, especially this JS file here. Take a look at each one of those. The book walks you through that at the end of the chapter, and it will start to make sense. And again, don't worry about every single method, every single line of code. We're talking about principles, and by the examples I've put together, hopefully things will start to make sense for you. So one of the things that we can do, we know the DOM is the various objects that are on the page, and it's this hierarchy in this tree. And um, a given object can have attributes to it. A good example, for instance, is the image uh, object, where it can actually have an attribute of the source, the location, the alt tag, the title tag, a border tag, and things like that. So those are attributes that are applied to the element. The book does give us, let's see, just so we kind of know what page we are on in general, we're talking page 279, 281, right up in there, that we can see that we can reference various elements and those attributes within the element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this page that I've created, and notice that we have 8 buttons here, and we're going to watch what happens to the various objects that are on the page based upon which button and which jQuery code that we actually end up running. Let's take a look at the code. So if you have this page up and you're looking at it, definitely open it up in Notepad or do a view source. And right now, I don't want you to worry about all of the JavaScript, the jQuery, excuse me, that's up in the functions. But notice here, we have our body tag, and I say modify the DOM, that's right here. And then I've got a bunch of buttons right here. These buttons are going to do things to the objects below. So each one of these buttons will do something to it. And so that's where that's coming from. And then here, notice that I have prof object 1, prof object 2, and prof object 3. So we'll be working on those at each time. So this is kind of the base layout of the page. Here is our menu options from the buttons that I've created, and here's the code that's going to do the work. So right off the bat, we see that we have this is prof object 1, and it's a picture of the moon, the super moon. I actually took this on the 13th. And it says here, view HTML in prof object 1. And if I click this, it pops up an alert, and it says H3, this is prof object 1, image source images supermoon. Click all. That's all this button does. How's that working? Looking at the code right here, here's the action, the click function for button 1. Button 1 here. Button 1 is referenced down here. That upon, and so when we click on this button that's called button 1, excuse me, that it's going to do an alert, and that alert is basically this code right here, which is basically saying, I want you to display and return the HTML that is living in the element called prof object 1. So if I scroll down to the page, here is prof object 1. Here is all of the HTML that's living in there. So that HTML, click on here, that's what's being displayed. So what that tells us right away is that we have access to all of the elements within a given object. Now let's take a look at prof object 2. Prof object 2 says this is prof object 2, and here is an image tag with an ID called mypic, and but there's nothing in there. There's no picture. If I refresh the page and we scroll down here, we see this is prof object 2. There's nothing there. So now let's take a look here. View the HTML. This is prof object 2, image ID mypic. So it is correctly viewing all of that HTML code living in the prof object 2 ID. Now what we're going to do is add the alt tag. Now if you remember from your Web 1 class, the alt tag basically is an alternative display if the picture isn't there. So let's look at the code for our button. That's button 3. We're going to first view the code. Then what we're going to do is add the attribute to mypic that basically says images supermoon JPEG. That what we want to do is if the image isn't being displayed, we want to display at least what image should be there. So I'm going to add the alt tag. Here it is without it. Now I click OK. And now you can see that the alt tag has been added to that HTML code. Click OK. Scroll down. Notice here now the images are being added to that. And I'll bet you if I just go ahead and if I was to add, I'm going to try something on the fly. I haven't tested this. Border. Let's go 1. Save it. I don't know if this is going to work. It should. Refresh the page. Alt tag. And then it says border 1. Click OK. And now if I view, notice now there's actually a border around where that image would go. So what's happened is now if I do a right page view source, notice what's interesting here is that the view source is still the same. It's still the original same HTML that was there but in memory to that instance of the web page, it is actually that element, prof object 2, is different than the original source. Now what I'm going to do is if I click on HTML, add the image. Click add image, and you can see now this is it before. I'm going to click, and now I've added the source right here for that image. Click OK. Now if I scroll down, the object is now there. One more time, add the title before, and now title is right here. Click OK. Scroll down. If I mouse over, now we can see the title attribute working successfully. So what you're starting to learn and see in this chapter is that we have access to all of the pieces, and jQuery allows us to change and manipulate them. If we take a look at the code, you can see here, this is where I added the alt tag, the alt attribute, the border attribute, and then on button 4, here's where I actually added the source attribute to say what picture do you want to in fact change, and then I added the title. I have an idea real quick. I'm going to test that. Hang on. Okay, I just added another button. So we had already gone through object 2. There's a blank image. There's nothing there. I'm going to add the alt tag and the border. You can see that the alt tag and the border are there. And then we're going to add the actual image, before and after. And you can see now the moon is there. Add the title, before and after. Scroll down, mouse over, and we see that the title is now displaying. And then what we need to do, and then what we're going to do is we have the image here, and you can see that we've got the title going on, but you've seen it where you want to flip an image and change that actual image. Then what we can do here is I'm going to click on button 5A that I just added. I'm going to change the image. There's the code before. There it is after. Scroll down, and now the moon is a picture of me. And at the same time, I changed the alt tag, the title tag as well. Here's the code where basically here I'm saying change that source attribute to a different picture. Instead of the supermoon picture, now it's me. And while you're at it, change the title to that. So now what you can see is by certain events happening. Now, right now it's a click event. But what if you were to do a mouse over event, on mouse over, and things like that, that you could easily start changing things. There's definitely a lot of examples of on mouse over events out there where when you mouse over a link, the picture changes, or you mouse over an image, you can flip the picture. That's a good way of doing things like for icons, for menu options, and things like that. So here's the code right here where you can see that basically I'm taking the same myPic object, which originally had nothing in it. Then it had the supermoon, and now it's got a picture of me along with the title change. Now, this is prof object 3 down here. Let's take a look at the code I have here. We're going to view that. All there is some straight HTML code in there. Now, if I want to add a tag, here it is before. Now I'm adding this H2 tag to that. And if I scroll down, you can see we just added this tag. Now that's happening here. From here, this line of code, we just added this tag. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a full list into the object. And we can add the list. There it is before, boom. And now you can see the list. You can add items to the list. You can add an item, take away an item, and things like that. The chapter gets into it very, very detailed. understand the concepts, and hopefully this short video will give you a way of thinking as you read the chapter. And then when you get to and if you're struggling through like page 282 and things like that, don't worry about it. But what will happen is then you'll get up to page 287. Page 287 use the table of contents application, and it does a really good job of highlighting the pieces of code and showing you what it does. And then also what happened, and there's an employee list application at page 298, and go over that, and you'll start to see those pieces and how it works. And then the last on page 307 talks about a slideshow application. And you'll hopefully what I've done is I've shown you the basic principles at a simplistic way of how these things flip and change, and basically how by what we've done is kind of manually forced it on a button click. But there can be other events that you would in fact want to use to trigger that event. And the examples that are given in the chapter really show you, like, we can fill in some data in a form, click submit, and then the whole display changes. And what's really cool there is when you learn PHP and database, you can actually have your data come in and then modify the objects on the page. And that becomes where HTML, PHP, jQuery all help make your web pages very, very dynamic. I know this chapter, this lesson isn't super detailed or super long. I just gave you a long one in chapter 8. I wanted to touch on this at a high level, so as you read the chapter, you won't get overwhelmed. And if you don't understand every single method, that's really okay. Again, we're looking at trying to understand how these pieces work and know what to look for, and see if you can see a relationship between the event, between the object name, and what changes. Hopefully this helps, and have a great day.